I quit a job that paid me around $120,000 a year. And the strange part is, from the outside, it looked like the kind of job most people are supposed to want. I had just come out of college. I was working in New York City. I had a serious corporate job, a strong salary, and a title that made it sound like my life was finally moving in the right direction. At the time, I honestly believed I had made it. I thought this was the path I was supposed to follow. Get the degree, get the job, earn good money, work hard, climb the ladder, and one day, decades later, finally enjoy the life I had been delaying. But after spending several years in corporate America, I learned three painful lessons that completely changed the way I saw work, money, time, and success. And once I saw those lessons clearly, I couldn't unsee them. I realized I wasn't climbing toward freedom. I was digging myself deeper into a hole. Every year, the hole became more comfortable, more familiar, and more difficult to escape. And before I got so deep that I could no longer climb out, I made the decision to quit. For several years after college, my life became painfully predictable. Every morning, I would commute about 1 hour into the office. Then I would sit there and work for 10, sometimes 12 hours. After that, I would go home, sleep, wake up the next morning, and do the exact same thing again. Work, sleep, work, sleep, work, sleep. At first, I thought that was just adulthood. I thought this was what responsible people did. I told myself this was normal, that everyone was tired, that everyone had to sacrifice, that if I just kept going long enough, eventually it would all make sense. But the more I repeated that routine, the more I started to feel like my life was being reduced to a schedule I never actually chose. And the saddest part was that there were only two moments in my day that I genuinely looked forward to. The first was when I stood up from my desk, walked to the bathroom, and finally got a few minutes alone with my phone. The second was when I stood up again, walked toward the exit, and finally left the office. That was it. Those two tiny moments were the highlight of my day. And when I really thought about that, it scared me because I started wondering how many years of my life I was willing to spend waiting for bathroom breaks and the moment I could finally go home. One day, after watching way too many motivational videos during one of those bathroom breaks, something finally clicked. I started to see my life as two different paths. The first path was bright. It was smooth, paved, predictable, and safe. A lot of people were already walking on it, so it felt familiar. It was the kind of path everyone understands. You get a stable job, you work hard, you keep earning, you keep moving forward, and you try not to question too much along the way. The second path was darker. It looked rough. It looked lonely. There were rocks on the ground, and there was no guarantee that it would lead anywhere. It was uncomfortable because there was no clear map, no promise, and no crowd of people proving that it was the right choice. And for a long time, I stayed on the safe path, even though I could feel something inside me slowly shutting down. I know some of you watching this may understand that feeling. Maybe the best part of your workday is when you step away from your desk. Maybe you are living for the moment you leave the office. Maybe you keep telling yourself this is just how life is supposed to be. But what if it does not have to be that way? What if the life you are accepting as normal is actually the life that is quietly taking you further away from who you were supposed to become? The first lesson started with the culture of work itself. In that world, it often felt like people were judged less by the value they created and more by how hard they looked like they were working. It was not always about whether the work was meaningful. It was about who stayed the latest, who looked the busiest, and who seemed willing to sacrifice the most. There were nights when I stayed in the office until 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and sometimes even past midnight, just to finish an assignment that somehow had to be done that day, as if everything would fall apart if it waited until morning. And I was not the only one there. Other people were still sitting at their desks too. Everyone seemed to be quietly competing with everyone else. People would talk about how late they stayed, how tired they were, how the company paid for their dinner, and how they got a ride home because they stayed past 9 p.m. I hated it, but because I wanted to belong, I joined the cycle. Then one night, I was already frustrated because I knew I had to work late again. It was sometime after 7 or 8 p.m., and my phone started ringing. I looked down and saw that my mom was calling. And my first thought was not, "My mom is calling, that's nice." My first thought was, what does she want now? I picked up, and in the kindest voice, she asked if I was coming home for dinner or if she should save food for me. And I answered like she had done something wrong. I said, no, I don't have time. Then I hung up. The worst part is that I stayed angry afterward. I kept working as if nothing had happened. But when I finally got home and saw my mom happy to see me, asking how work was, bringing out the dinner she had saved for me, the guilt hit me all at once. I had given the best part of my energy to someone else's project, and then I brought the worst version of myself home to my own family. That was when I learned the first lesson. If you do not build your own dream, someone else will use your time, your energy, and your life to build theirs. And the danger is not just that they take your working hours. The danger is that eventually they start taking your emotions, your reactions, and the relationships you care about most. The second lesson did not come from a dramatic speech or a major failure. It came from someone disappearing. I graduated from Vanderbilt University in 2017, then went into finance on Wall Street. I worked on projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I worked with executives. I even worked in London for half a year, and at the beginning, I was proud of it. I was excited to ride the elevator up to the 27th floor. I was excited to tell my parents that their son had a good job, that he was making a great salary, that all of their sacrifices had finally led to something. But after a few months, that feeling disappeared. The same office that once made me feel proud started to feel empty. I was spending so much time and energy doing work that looked important, but deep down, it felt meaningless. I felt like a tiny spinning cog inside a machine, inside an even bigger machine. Then there was John. Every day after lunch, around the same time, I would pass him in the hallway. He was older, friendly, always smiling, always ready with a small joke. He never complained. He seemed like the kind of employee every company would want. Then one day, he stopped showing up. At first, I assumed he was on vacation. Then a week passed, then a month, then several months, and nothing changed. People still came to the office. People still left the office. Meetings still happened. Deadlines still moved forward. The company kept running as if John had never been there at all. That was when the second lesson became painfully clear. We are all replaceable, every single one of us. To a company, you are often only as valuable as the hours of your life you are able and willing to give. And when you can no longer give those hours, or when you decide you want to give fewer of them, they can find someone else who will. The third lesson forced me to look much deeper than the job itself. When I was a kid, I remember being much more open to helping people. If someone at school did not have a toy, I would let them play with mine. If I had extra snacks and my friends had already finished theirs, I would share what I had. But as I got older, that part of me started to fade. I became more guarded, more cynical, more focused on protecting myself. A big part of that came from watching my parents get taken advantage of because they could not speak English well. I was there when some of those things happened, but I was just a little kid. I was scared, and I did not know how to speak up. So somewhere along the way, I started believing that the safest thing I could do was get a job that paid well. If I had money, I thought I would have more leverage. If I had a good job, I thought I would not have to depend on other people as much. But then months into working, maybe a year or so in, I found myself sitting in front of a computer, working on another PowerPoint presentation. I was probably resizing a box, adjusting a slide, or making something look just a little cleaner. And suddenly I thought, is this it? Is this what my life is supposed to be about? A better Excel model? A cleaner PowerPoint slide? Another project that feels urgent today and invisible tomorrow? That was when I realized what was missing from my career. Purpose. If you do not have a purpose of your own, you will become part of someone else's purpose. And I am not saying everyone has to quit their job or chase some huge dream, but for me, I knew I was not okay with continuing to live that way. I wanted to use my background, my education, and what I had learned to help other people understand money, personal finance, investing, and how to take more control over their lives. Because as much as people say money is the root of all evil, the truth is that money affects every one of us. And unless we learn to control money, money will control us. So let me ask you this. If your job disappeared tomorrow, would you still know who you are? And if no company gave you a title, a salary, or a role to perform, would you still know what you are here to do? It took me years to finally take the first real steps down that darker path. And I want to be honest, I know I was lucky to even have the option to make that choice. I had a job that paid well. I had a comfortable position. I had benefits. I had a career that many people would have been grateful to have. That was part of what made quitting so difficult. Internally, I felt a huge amount of guilt. My dad was the hardest working person I knew. Out of 365 days in a year, he would only take one day off, Chinese New Year, so he could spend the whole day with our family. When I was younger, that was hard because I barely saw him, but it also shaped the way I thought about work. So when I even considered leaving a stable job after only a few years, part of me felt like I was being ungrateful. It felt like I was dishonoring the sacrifices my parents had made. They had left Hong Kong, left their friends, left their family, came to the United States without knowing anyone, and built a life without even speaking the language well. And now I was thinking about walking away from the kind of opportunity they had sacrificed so much for me to get. But I also realized something else. Staying in something deeply unsatisfying just because it looks safe from the outside is not always the responsible choice. Sometimes it is just fear dressed up as responsibility. I did not want to be paid money to stay quiet, forget my dreams, and keep walking down a path where the only purpose was to earn more money. I did not want to buy things just to impress people I did not truly care about. I did not want to lock myself into golden handcuffs that became harder to break with every bigger purchase, every nicer car, every more expensive lifestyle decision. Money matters, but the real power of money is not that it lets you buy more things. The real power of money is that it can buy back your freedom. Freedom to spend your time how you want, freedom to choose where you go, freedom to decide who controls your emotions, your energy in your life. And yes, I was scared. I was scared of failing. I was scared of disappointing my parents. I was scared that after everything they sacrificed, I might take this chance and still not make it. But there was one thing I was even more scared of: regret. I was more scared of never trying. I was more scared of looking back years later and realizing I had the chance to do something meaningful, but I stayed still because the safer path was easier to explain to other people. So now I am on that darker path. I am trying to pursue my purpose. I am trying to use what I know to help people understand money, personal finance, investing, entrepreneurship, and the freedom that can come from learning how money really works. And if you are still watching this, I want you to know something. It is okay to be scared. You cannot grow without discomfort. You cannot change your life without facing fear. And if you are not ready to jump yet, that is okay too. But start planning, start thinking, start building the strategy that will help you take the next step when the time comes. Because there may never be a perfect time. At some point, if the path in front of you matters enough, you have to take the jump when you can afford to drown.